We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Not only will this tax plan pay for itself, but it will pay down debt.
There are moral and legal obligation questions that I think we'll have to wrestle with as a society.
When we as people go wobbly on the truth, we go wobbly on America.
All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done.
And this is only the beginning.
From 100.9 FM WXIR, this is Evidence of Design, and I'm your host, Jason Taylor. Evidence of Design is a live talk show about the political economy. We critique income and wealth inequality and support democratic values. Thank you for listening, and welcome.
Last week, the House began the hearing process of Speaker Pelosi's signature bill, H.R. 1, the Democrat Politician Protection Act.
Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester, New York. Thanks for tuning in to WXIR and us this morning. My name is Jason Taylor, and I'm joined by my good friends and co-hosts, Matt Treadwell.
Hello.
And Mary Lawrence.
Good morning.
This is episode 49 of Evidence of Design. We've been on air a little over the year, and we are on air talking mainly about income and wealth inequality and other things that threaten democratic institutions in the United States. We critique income and wealth inequality and wonder about some of the things that can be done to make our society more equal. And we're going to talk about one of those things today, known as H.R. 1. That is House Resolution 1. It was proposed at the start of this year on January 3rd in the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. And that is what you heard Speaker of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, refer to as the Democratic Politician Protection Act. We'll talk about why he would call H.R. 1 that. We'll talk about what H.R. 1 entails and includes. And in my opinion, there's a lot in H.R. 1 that we should know about that would make our democracy a lot stronger. Some things could be changed, but a lot of the things in H.R. 1 are helping out our society, I think, would help out our society if it was voted upon. You're most welcome to participate in this discussion. We want to hear from you about H.R. 1. Matt, we're also talking about something else today. What else will we be chatting about later on in the show?
Well, it's kind of a surprise, but basically I want to take a more feels-based approach to some of the themes we've covered heavily on this show, namely what is narratively appealing about liberalism for us.
So we'll get a little more philosophical in the second half. At either time, as folks, you are welcome to participate in this discussion in a number of ways. You can reach us by calling 585-219-8889, 585-219-8889. We don't have to wait to take your calls. You can give us a ring at any time. We are live for you on this warmest day of the year so far, I think. Saturday,
An
March 30th.
actual spring day.
Yes, it is. I'm looking to get outside later on. I think that would be quite nice. So do enjoy the weather out there while it is there. Give us a call, though, anytime, 585-219-8889. You can also participate in a number of ways. Email, radioeod@gmail.com, Twitter @radioeod, or Facebook, radioeod. We're here for you to have this conversation. Matt, we ready to take it away?
PS exclusive by Life Without Buildings.
And this is Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. Today we're going to start talking about H.R. 1. That was the first bill proposed this year by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. It was proposed on January 3rd. The bill is technically called For the People Act of 2019. It says that it aims to expand Americans' access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, and strengthen ethics rules for public servants and other purposes. So the bill essentially is a giant package of reforms that would ostensibly strengthen our democracy. That is the aim for the Democratic-controlled House in this bill. Now, again, it was the first piece of legislation proposed by the Democratic-controlled House. It was proposed by a gentleman by the name of John Sarbanes. He's a House of Reps member from Maryland. He serves on the House Oversight and Reform Committee, hence this is where the bill is kind of coming out of. And interestingly, his father, Paul Sarbanes, served in the Senate for 30 years, and you might remember, listeners or Matt or Mary, the Sarbanes word from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in around 2002. Under George W. Bush. At that time, there was a lot of scandals and giant companies like Enron, the energy company. And so the Sarbanes-Oxley Act essentially was a bipartisan piece of legislation that made it so that publicly owned companies had to have more accounting requirements, had to make more public their financial disclosures. So this Sarbanes representative has just a history in serving in the House, in the government, like many other politicians in this country do, though.
Yeah. And it sounds like getting into financial disclosures actually leads us into parts of what is included in this act. So that's a pretty interesting parallel.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels because this H.R. 1 is so widespread. So H.R. 1 was introduced on January 3rd, and the House of Reps passed it on March 8th, just a few weeks ago.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know the makeup of the vote?
We do. So every single Democrat in the House voted for the bill, and every single Republican opposed the bill.
How interesting.
How interesting. So let's talk about why that is, though. We heard Mitch McConnell at the start oppose this bill. We'll hear more from Mitch McConnell later on. Of course, he's in the Senate, so every other Republican, though, in the House opposed it. What is in H.R. 1? What is in the For the People Act of 2019? There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's basically split into 3 sections. The first section covers basically expanding voting rights. The second section covers expanding campaign finance regulation to help make sure that our campaigns are not influenced by big money. And the third part of the bill covers ethics, trying to make sure our politicians and government is working, well, for the people as opposed to other interest groups. So the bill aims principally to make voting rights stronger, to reform campaign finance, and to make ethics rules stronger.
So this is coming at a time when a lot of politicians, namely Republicans, are passing laws, or at least trying to pass laws to sort of restrict voting access to a number of people, primarily minorities, through things like voter ID laws and other things. So this is kind of coming at a time when it's perhaps most needed. Also, I should mention, we've covered this before, but the I can't remember what specifically it is, but the part in the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which mandates that states who have a history of restricting voting access to minorities have to get permission from the federal government whenever they decide to make a change to their voting laws. That has since been thrown out due to a Supreme Court decision back in 2013.
Yep. Shelby County versus Holder.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about that, Matt, and you're totally right in that a lot of the things in this bill are reactions against what, well, at least the Democrats, but I would hope that most people would say are problems in our democracy. And you're speaking about one in, let's see if my mic is on here. Am I coming through? There we go. So you're speaking about, Matt, about the restrictions in voting rights, which have been going on for the past decade because of the Supreme Court decision in 2013 called Shelby County versus Holder. To repeat a little bit, just for listeners, is that the 1965 Voting Rights Act made a nationwide prohibition against a denial of voting rights. So it's like you couldn't restrict voting rights on the basis of, well, race, color, or language. And so there's different sections in that milestone piece of civil rights legislation that made it so that Americans can go to vote, particularly African Americans who were subject to Jim Crow laws even after the passage of the 14th and 15th Amendment. And so Section 4 and Section 5 of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, I should say, were effectively repealed with this 2013 Supreme Court decision that was passed by the conservative majority in the Supreme Court. It made it so that states who had a history of passing restrictive voting laws, it made it so that those states weren't subject to essentially any more federal oversight if they wanted to change things that were going on with how they ran their elections. And so it used to be those states, particularly Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas, if those states wanted to change anything about how they ran their elections, the federal government would have to approve of the change and prove that it wasn't discriminating against anyone. Well, this Supreme Court case effectively repealed that, and since that repeal, there has been really no federal oversight on state changes in elections. And this has allowed a lot of states, particularly conservative ones, to pass a lot of restrictive voting measures, such as purging voters from rolls, requiring more voter ID, requiring proof of citizenship, having less polling places overall, restricting early voting, having less absentee voting, and having lower third-party registration. And so all of those things have sort of happened to restrict voting. Am I coming through here?
I can't hear you through my microphone.
Am I coming through
or
here?
through my headphones.
Okay.
I don't know what the people are hearing.
Yeah, I can't tell how much people are hearing or not. Well, let me try this mic. Mary, let's get you on mic 3 here. Mary, give us a shout.
All right, we're here.
Just a good squawk.
Give us a good squawk. So, long story short, folks, Matt, I appreciate you bringing it up, and sorry for somewhat of a long tangent, but that's really important. And this H.R. 1 piece would say, no, we want to rethink Shelby County versus Holder, and we want to allow more federal oversight of changes in elections that would discriminate people from voting. And that's pretty important.
I mean, that sounds like an excellent resolution. And it sounds like it would make a huge change for our democracy and make it more of a, fully people-run democracy, which it sounds like McConnell, for example, doesn't exactly want.
Yeah, that is interesting. There's a lot of reasons why Republicans don't support this bill, and a number of them are they think that it promotes Democratic politicians more so than Republicans, but we'll get to there. Hopefully we would think that allowing more people to vote is good for everyone.
Well, hopefully, I mean,
I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, having a vote that, or like having a piece of legislation that would allow more people to vote shouldn't make a difference as to what politicians are in office, or that shouldn't be the focus. I think it's problematic that is a focus.
Mm-hmm. Matt, do you want to jump in on that?
I just think that the idea is that if Republicans are worried about voting being more accessible to people, then they should be altering their policies and their standpoints in order to appeal to those people, not changing the system to make it less accessible.
Yeah.
I agree. But we will continue talking about that sort of Republican backlash against H.R. 1. And so there's a lot of other things in the voting section of the bill. For example, they would make it so that every state has to have online voter registration, so you don't have to go to like the DMV or the post office to get your voter registration form.
Just to clarify, that's in addition to what is already in place, correct?
Correct. Yep. They would also make it so that this is huge, there's automatic voter registration. So turning 18, you would automatically be registered to vote using other government forms. So whether you're applying for, I don't know if college, for example, if applying for your FAFSA, or if you apply for your driver's license, other government agencies could share that information with the elections agencies, and therefore you'd automatically be registered to vote. That's a huge change.
Okay, so in that case, it sounds like you'd automatically be registered to vote, and then if you decided to register with a specific party, you would do that additionally on your own.
Yes. You could opt out as well.
Okay.
So I'm sure there's still party affiliation. The bill doesn't mention how that works, but there'd be automatic voter registration, which I think is a huge proponent for democracy, because we know that if you are automatically registered, like in Australia, although they have, you have to vote or else you get penalized, I think, you're more likely to vote. And I think that's a good thing. There's also same-day voter registration in this bill. They also ensure that folks who've been convicted of felonies who serve their sentence can get their right to vote back again, which we heard a lot about in Florida last election cycle. This is huge too. They say that every single the voting system must have paper ballots so that you can find a trail of the votes. So this helps protect against hacking of the election system. And there are a lot of states out there, I believe either Alabama or Georgia, for example, that don't have paper ballots. So there's no way to do a recount if the machines malfunction. In New York State, we have a paper ballot. You fill out that ballot, you feed it through the machine. People use the machine count, but then if anything messes up, you can go back to those paper ballots and look at what bubble you filled in.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important, I think. They would also expand early voting to 15 days before the election. And then here is a big one, that they would make Election Day a federal holiday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is a really big issue, especially for people who are maybe low income or live far away from the election site and aren't able to get to their polling place. So having a holiday, I don't know what would a federal holiday actually close? Would shops still be open, or is everything closed?
Nope. So a federal holiday would mean like government workers, schools would be closed, and other government agencies would be closed, but private employers would still be open. It's up to private employers then to close and give their employees the opportunity to go vote. However, in the bill, it specifically mentions we encourage private employers to make this a holiday as well for their employees. So that's still a big deal.
That would be a huge change.
Right.
And I know that's something that is common in a lot of other countries, where either voting is on a Sunday where things are already closed, or most things are already closed, or it is a federal holiday. So I think that would make a huge change for voter turnout. Yeah.
And so, listeners, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about H.R. 1 today. It is a bill proposed by the House of Representatives, the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. It's called For the People Act, and it does a number of things to strengthen our democracy, like expand voting rights, like make campaign finance have more oversight, and also improve government ethics. And so we talked a little bit about the expansion of voting rights. There's a lot of other things going on in the bill, too, that we're going to whirlwind through. You can find a lot about the bill online. I know this sounds silly, but if you Google H.R. 1, there's a lot of great sites out there that break down some of the components of the bill. The bill is about 500 pages long. I try to get through the first 4 pages. You can just look up kind of the different sites that show you what's in it, and it's broken down quite nicely.
Honestly, even Wikipedia is a great resource for this one. It breaks it down in just if you're looking for a basic idea of what's in it, it's a good place to start.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about campaign finance, the second main tenet of H.R. 1. It requires groups who donate to politicians who donate more than $10,000 to have to disclose who they are. So it's preventing dark money from influencing our campaign system. It curbs the use of shell companies to funnel money. We're hearing a lot about this in terms of, the Panama Papers, and also with, who's the gentleman who was Paul Manafort, and different people like that using shell companies to funnel money. That's a big deal. What do you think, Matt?
Yes.
You think that's a big deal, too?
I do.
Well, let's get to the most controversial part of the entire bill, and this is rethinking how our campaigns are funded. Right now, campaigns are largely funded from private sources. There's not much public funding of our campaigns. This means that politicians, when they run for office, have to run based off of private donations.
Mm-hmm. Or their own money, as we saw with Donald Trump in the most recent presidential election.
Right. And so what that does is that it favors wealthier individuals, because if you're wealthier, you can essentially fund your own election. And nowadays, if you want to run for office, particularly under the Democratic or Republican Party, you have to prove to the party leadership that you have X numbers of thousands, if not millions of dollars to run for office. And they essentially won't endorse you if you don't have money.
And they want to see that you have the ability to fundraise as part of your campaign, which we can look into, I guess, whether that is actually a good idea or not.
Right. And so, you go, Matt.
What is that Supreme Court decision that allows companies to act as private individuals to...
Citizens United.
Yeah.
And this H.R. 1 bill says that we should rethink Citizens United. It's, of course, one of Bernie Sanders' main tenets for running for office is that we should repeal Citizens United. Companies should not be counted as First Amendment rights for free speech when they donate money to politicians. Mm-hmm. And so this bill says that has injected too much money into our campaigns. It's made corporations and companies too powerful, and it makes politicians beholden to corporate interests. And so what this proposes instead is to have what's called a 6-to-1 public funding ratio for campaigns. This gets complicated. A 30-second breakdown is that essentially if you are a small donor, meaning you donate, I think, less than $200 to a campaign, then the federal government would match that 6-to-1. I believe that how it's worked. This is quite complicated for me. And so that means that it's a lot easier for the public to finance who is running for office. And now this has gotten a lot of controversy, and Republicans have been saying, well, we do not want to use taxpayer dollars to fund elections. We don't want to use taxpayer dollars to fund candidates running for office, because what if there's a candidate that you don't approve of? Why should your taxpayer dollars go to fund that individual running for office? Because guess what? Okay, so you're donating to a Democratic politician because you want the Democrat to win. Well, guess what? What if there's a Republican donating to a Republican to win, and then the federal government is matching that contribution? Your taxpayer dollars are now going to fund a politician that you don't support. That's their argument. And so the Democrats shot back and they changed some of the wording in the bill. You're like, fine, let's make it so that we're not just using sort of general taxpayer funds for this. Let's have the funding come out of a program that would be a 2.75% fee on all criminal and civil fines and penalties with banks and corporations that commit corporate malfeasance. So basically, how this public funding of campaigns would go is that corporations and banks who commit financial fraud, they would be fined for doing that fraud, and that money would go to be publicly funding our campaigns.
Seems a bit snarky.
That's really funny, actually.
Republicans aren't so happy about that one either, but that is a big change.
Yeah. When you were talking about the sort of Republican response, the initial Republican response to we don't want to use taxpayer dollars because we don't want people to have to support politicians that they don't like, I was thinking to myself, what is the alternative then? The system we have in place now, where only a select few wealthy individuals really have access to this sort of thing?
Right, where big dark money influences campaigns. Well, let's hear what Mitch McConnell has to say, Matt. Would you mind playing the second clip from Mitch McConnell? This is him talking on the Senate floor, I believe, on February 12th, talking about H.R. 1, specifically the 6-to-1 public funding of campaigns.
So when you ask Democrats why exactly they would propose something as absolutely ludicrous as a massive new taxpayer-funded bailout of the permanent political class, sometimes they make vague claims that problems in American politics would go away if only we took more power out of the people's hands and shipped it here to the nation's capital. Now, Madam President, the evidence suggests they're dead wrong on this.
So that's Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell speaking about H.R. 1 and speaking against the 6-to-1 public funding of campaigns.
I picked out a couple of really interesting bits from... I hadn't heard that clip before just now. And two things that I found really interesting are, one, the word bailout, which has, I think, mostly been used when we're talking about banks going under in the Great Recession and getting bailed out by the government. This does not quite seem like the same thing. The other thing was that he was talking about taking power out of the people's hands and putting it into the nation's capital, which to me seems like, I would imagine the Democrats who voted for this would agree. It sounds a lot more like we're trying to put the power back into people's hands by allowing their small contributions to make more of a difference.
I agree, Mary. Yeah, he very deftly uses language to frame it as this is a big government power grab that Washington is going to decide everything. And
Power grab, huh?
Yeah.
Want to talk about power grabs? I'll talk about power grabs. Talk about going around the entire legislative body to get the funding for a border wall. That
Right. Yes. Are you angry about some hypocrisy, Matt?
Yeah.
I do have one sort of note, though, that I'm not sure about. It mentions in the establishment of this 6-to-1 funding that it would be a voluntary 6-to-1 match, and I do wonder what that voluntary means. Does that mean that the government would be choosing when they're going to match that donation? Because that is something that could be problematic. You know, if the government is saying, like, okay, we're going to back this one donation but not this other one, that, you know, could be problematic.
That's a good question. And honestly, right now, it's tax season right now. If anyone's looked at the 1040 form, this is the basic tax filing form, there's a box on that form that says the presidential election campaign box. Have you ever seen that?
No.
No? It's really interesting that it's there. We should do a whole episode on the history of that because it's a really interesting story.
Yeah, I tried to do my taxes as fast as I could. So.
Yeah, and most people do it on online,
yeah.
TurboTax or something that probably doesn't even bring up this form. I don't know, or this option. But essentially, you can voluntarily check that box to say, yes, I want $3 to go towards public funding of elections. And it doesn't mean you get a $3 less of a return. It just means that the government now has to appropriate $3 of its tax pool to go towards publicly funding elections.
Huh.
Interesting.
And so I don't know, Mary, to answer your question, I don't know what that voluntary means in this bill, but that already exists, public funding of elections. It already exists in some capacity, and it came out of an important place, I think. And so this is a really interesting conversation that we need to do more research on and have other guests on to continue this about, like, what does public funding of elections mean?
Mm-hmm. I guess I just read it more. I read it in a different way, where it seems like you're reading voluntary as it being voluntary from the donor,
right?
And I was reading voluntary as coming from the government. So maybe that's something that I just, we could look into more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I keep misspeaking. I should be saying public funding of campaigns, not elections. I should be saying public funding of campaigns. So I apologize about that, listeners. Let's go. The very last piece of this H.R. 1 bill is expanding ethics. And so long story short is there's a lot of small pieces in here that would expand the oversight of politicians to be more ethical, meaning not taking donations from lobbying groups, or if they do take donations, to have to disclose it. There's a lot of dark loopholes that politicians can use to not have to disclose where they get their money from. And there's also a provision in this bill that says specifically that candidates for president and vice president must release their tax returns, which is a direct shot, of course, at Donald Trump, who is the only modern presidential candidate and president who has not released his tax returns for whatever reason. And so that is H.R. 1, folks. I want to wrap it up there. There's a lot to it. We just walked through some of the highlights of the bill. We talked about how the bill wants to expand voting rights by making voting a federal holiday and wants to make it so that voting is automatic, so you're automatically registered to vote, and wants to make it so that it repeals some of the provisions in the 2013 Shelder versus Holder Supreme Court decision that made it so that the 1965 Voting Rights Act has no teeth behind it, making it so that you can't restrict voting rights. It also wants to make it so that people have to disclose how much money they're giving to campaigns if they donate over $10,000. It makes it so that there might be an option to publicly fund campaigns. And also it makes it so that politicians have to have more stringent ethics rules. There's a lot to this. It's a great thing to look into. The House of Representatives already passed it. Matt, the future of this bill now resides in the Senate. In order for a bill to pass, the House can propose it, gets approved by a committee, the House passed it, this is what happened. Now it must go to the Senate, which approves it. Can we play the last clip from Mitch McConnell and see what does the future of this bill look like in the Senate?
This is a terrible proposal. It will not get any floor time in the Senate. But it is important to understand what they're trying to do here. And I think our colleagues in the House have done a great job in educating the members of the House as to what's involved with this. Finally, let me suggest that I believe we can actually win elections against people who vote for this turkey. taxpayer funding of elections, partisan.
All right, that was a live, real laugh. I'm going to fade it out there to spare you your ears from what Mitch McConnell is saying.
I've never heard a bill called a turkey before.
It's because he can't swear on the Senate floor.
Or on here.
Or on
here.
Or on the radio,
I mean, thank you, Mitch McConnell, for not swearing on the Senate floor so that we could play you on air.
So we appreciate your sacrifice.
Long story short, folks, listeners, if you're out there and you're thinking that H.R. 1 sounds like a good bill, it will not pass in the Senate. There's essentially no possibility that this bill is going anywhere until Democrats retake control of the Senate, and that's fine. A lot of the Democratic lawmakers behind this have been saying this is a long game. We're waiting for the power to shift. This is really important because we talk all the time on the show about problems, and then the critique is often, well, what do you propose that we do? I think some of the things in H.R. 1 are great examples of things that we can do to improve democracy and civil rights in the United States of America.
I mean, if we are making voting more accessible to people who previously have had a difficult time getting to polls because of voter ID laws, because of lack of transportation, because of having to work, and those are just from the beginning of the section, I think that could make a huge difference in how our democracy runs and who gets a voice in it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Jason, is this bill able to just sort of hang in limbo until perhaps a democratically controlled Senate is able to vote on it?
Yep, it will hang in limbo. It's called right now the For the People Act of 2019. I think, honestly, what we're going to see is this will be the For the People Act of 2020 or 2021, depending on the outcome of the next presidential election. If Donald Trump wins, this will be the For the People Act of 2024. If our democracy survives that long. Not to be a conspiracy theorist but just like the conversation that we'll be having in 2024 might be completely different than what we're having right now.
Sure.
And so that's why we've harped before on the show that the next election is very important. Every election is very important. The next election is preeminently important for a number of reasons. And so if you're out there wondering, look, I'm wanting to get into politics, I want to actually support a specific political piece of legislation or agenda, H.R. 1, folks, might be a great place to start. It's easy to remember. You can go look it up. And what we can do is we can tell all of our local House of Reps members to vote for it. Because guess what? Not a single Republican member of the House voted for this bill. Besides the city of Rochester, which is Joe Morelli, all of the other surrounding areas and counties surrounding Rochester, the folks there are Republican, they did not vote for this bill. So we are surrounded. This isn't some faraway problem in Washington. The people who are representing our suburbs and the counties and localities around Rochester did not vote for this bill. If you want to affect change and see change happen, give a call to those politicians who are supposedly representing our interests and say, why don't you want to expand voting rights, make it so that politicians have to be held more accountable, and make it so that less corporate influence is had in our campaigns.
Maybe we should invite them on the show.
We could. We're coming for you next. So let's pivot from H.R. 1. Thanks for tuning in to 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. Matt, what were you saying?
I thought we could play a song.
Oh, let's absolutely play a song instead of me doing a hard pivot. But folks, thanks for tuning in. We're going to do a quick pivot now, and you're welcome to participate in a number of ways. 585-219-8889, 585-219-8889. Think about that. Give us a call. Talk about H.R. 1 or anything else you'd like to talk about as we're listening to these fine tunes.
The Helicopter Spies by Swell Maps. Jason, Mary?
That's us.
Yes.
Well, so I know that Jason is familiar with a certain YouTuber called ContraPoints. Mary, do you have any experience with her content?
I am not really. I've heard of her, but I don't know that I've actually watched the YouTube channel.
Okay. So this will be good. I can give you a brief rundown as well as our listeners.
Excellent.
So ContraPoints is the YouTube username of a woman named Natalie Wynn, who basically makes videos and has been making videos for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, that are basically all about sort of exploring the ideas, the stories behind sort of the extreme right, the alt-right, white supremacists, nationalists. And she does this. She's explained in the past, both on her channel and in interviews, that she does this because YouTube has become heavily sort of radicalized and sort of right-leaning. There's a lot of content creators on YouTube right now that sort of push a far-right ideology, and there's not a lot of popular, at least, YouTubers on the left side of the spectrum who are doing the same thing.
Besides Evidence of Design?
Yeah. I said popular, Jason.
Well taken.
And she's very interesting. I recommend her content to anybody who has a passing interest in any of these sorts of issues. Her deconstruction of a lot of their arguments it's very entertaining. She's very funny, and I recommend it. But
can I ask, what are some of the things that she does look at in her content?
Yeah. Well, let me just boot something up right here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
She has a background in philosophy, so she comes at a lot of things from a ideological point of view, like really looking behind what are the ideas that underpin certain things, like white nationalism. What do white nationalists think?
Yeah, her most popular video is I'm just looking real quick. It's like decrypting the alt-right, how to recognize a fascist, and this is one of my favorite videos by her, where she basically sort of goes through and identifies all the symbolism and sort of gestures or like winking nods that white supremacists will make in order to identify one another, but to remain sort of incognito to people who are not sensitive to picking up on those gestures. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating stuff. She has videos talking about critiquing capitalism, violence, sort of like the last year when the Unite the Right march was happening in Charlottesville, there was a lot of talk of the sort of violence that people like Antifa met with the violence that was being propagated by the white supremacists in that march. And there was a lot of conversation about, especially due to President Trump's comments about there were awful people on both sides, that comment about whether or not it is acceptable to engage violence of that kind with violence to sort of prevent it or as a protection. And it's all interesting. There's a wide range of topics. And recently...
Can I just interject again quickly?
Yeah,
how does she get that kind of information? Like, where... is she like reading alt-right websites or?
Yes.
Okay.
So she does spend a lot of time sort of. She has said that she has spent a lot of time on alt-right message boards, and sort of reading their literature. She has a video on Jordan Peterson where she takes points from his book. Jordan Peterson being this Canadian professor, University of Toronto. Who has sort of sprung up or become...
Yeah, he's become a best-selling author.
Popular in the last couple of years because of his critique of what he calls like...
Postmodern neo-Marxism?
Something like that.
Yep. Something like that.
I don't pay that much attention to Jordan Peterson.
I love me a good conversation about Marxism and postmodernism. I don't know if you smash them together what comes out of it, but...
yeah, that's
you know,
watch the video. It's really insightful. But so really, why I'm bringing this all up is because the online magazine Vice recently ran a short spotlight piece on Natalie, and it's a quick 7-minute video, but there's a moment in the interview where she's asked a question, and I just want to play it for you now.
With fact-checking every lie uttered by the president or by a white supremacist or a misogynist, that you look at the arguments undergirding their ideas and try to unpack those. Why did you decide to do that?
Facts don't matter to people as much as people think they do. People don't believe because of facts and evidence. They believe things because they're part of a story that they tell themselves. And so I guess part of what I'm doing is understanding those stories and understanding psychologically why are these stories being told.
And
so when I first heard that, it really hit me because it reminded me of something that I had heard a year ago when Jason and I were covering the Cambridge Analytica scandal that came out of the last election cycle, where some of our viewers, some longtime viewers might remember
Listeners.
Cambridge, viewers.
Here we are.
Some of our listeners might remember Cambridge Analytica was basically a shell company set up by SLC Group, I think.
A British group. Yeah.
A British company that basically hacked the Facebook profiles of millions of people, like 88 million people or something like that, and used that data to create psychographic profiles in order to predict the sort of tendencies of people and to target them with ads that would influence their decisions in the election. And part of the reporting done on Cambridge Analytica that Jason and I looked at was a piece done by Channel 4 News in which the former managing director of Cambridge Analytica is now defunct, but the former managing director, Mark Turnbull, in a sort of said on camera, but he didn't realize he was being recorded, but he said on camera this.
The two fundamental human drivers when it comes to taking information on board, effectively, are hopes and fears, and many of those are unspoken and even unconscious. You didn't know that was a fear until you saw something that just evoked that reaction from you.
Right.
And our job is to drop the bucket further down the well than anybody else, to understand what are those really deep-seated underlying fears, concerns. There's no good fighting an election campaign on the facts, because actually it's all about emotion.
So Jason, when you and I covered that, when we talked about it last year, I recall us being very sort of concerned by his comments, by Mark Turnbull's comments, thinking that it sounded very manipulative, which it is, and that personally, I believe we took the stance that, of course, in any sort of field, but especially in politics, you want your decisions, your policies to be informed by the facts, not to go looking for facts to support your like pre-made beliefs or decisions. But I think that we can both sort of accept that that kind of goes against human nature, human tendencies, that we have things like the scientific method, for example, in order to guard against sort of creating experiments to prove a preconceived notion. But even so, there are plenty of examples where people fall short. And so maybe it would be interesting to take a look at ourselves now and to sort of talk about or sort of try to pull apart the reasons why we find liberalism appealing from a narrative perspective.
Am I on the? Okay.
There you go.
Can I just first ask if that, when you heard that quote last year about Cambridge, or from the previous manager of Cambridge Analytica, did that come as a surprise to you?
I don't know if I was surprised so much as I was concerned.
I was surprised. I mean, here's the director of a large corporation that has troves of data on millions of people, and they're using that data to advertise certain political messages and statements towards them to, on purpose, wield their emotions for a political endpoint. That phenomenon doesn't surprise me that it can happen, but here's an individual who is saying they're doing this, they know they're doing it, they want to do it, there's intention behind it, they are doing it, they have done it. 88 million people. That's a problem. And so to hear that, actually, someone say it, because so much we talk about, oh, Mitch McConnell thinks this or that, and of course
right.
Mitch McConnell isn't saying that stuff. Maybe he is behind closed doors, but behind a microphone he isn't saying that. So it's up to us to read between the lines and say, what is Mitch McConnell's story? Why does Mitch McConnell not support H.R. 1? What story does he have that he's telling himself ideologically to say, this is the Democratic the Democratic Politician Protection Act, as opposed to the For the American People Act?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't questioning that it was a problem. I was just wondering if it had surprised you, because you just mentioned making that connection with what you heard now, and I just was wondering if it was something that had come to the surface, or how you had interpreted that quotation at the time.
At the time, it just felt like an example of something that needed to sort of be railed against, like the spread of disinformation. Because I believe that, perhaps not in that quote that we played, but he does, like, he even says that facts are not important, and so I interpreted that as him saying that the ads that they targeted people with were intentionally misleading, or at least not concerned with being accurate.
Yeah, and there's tons of trolls out there. We know that there's trolls out there who relish in creating fake content. That's what they do, and they like doing it, and they don't care about the harm that it causes. In fact, the more harm that it causes, the more successful their endeavor. And these could be 18-year-old kids. I'm not saying the whole 18-year-old kids living in mom's basement thing. I'm saying these are literally 18-year-old kids, perhaps, who are creating trolls, and then there's professional trolls in Russia who are doing this. And so there are people out there who we know are doing this intentionally.
But maybe, having said all that, we can take a look at ourselves now.
Sure.
And talk about sort of our own stories and what has brought us here to this radio show.
And let's do that. And listeners, you're welcome also to participate by giving us a ring at 585-219-8889, 585-219-8889. What stories do you tell yourself to make the world make sense to you? Do the stories that you tell yourself influence your political ideology? Why do you think certain things about the world, and why do some things make sense to you, politically speaking? 585-219-8889 on Evidence of Design, WXIR in Rochester, New York. Who wants to start with liberalism? All three of us would probably define ourselves on the left of the political spectrum. I'm fine saying that. I generally support Democrats, though I have a lot of bones to pick with the Democratic Party. So I'm a liberal, for whatever that means.
I'm not even registered with a major party, so I would probably say the same.
Sure. I mean, whether or not you check the box next to the Democratic Party is different than what your political ideology is.
Yeah. No, but as a registered member of the Green Party, I think most people would interpret that, and I would agree that I'm generally on the left.
Yeah. I guess we may have talked about this before. I guess if I'm going to start, I would say that ontology, the nature of being, what are the barest, most elements of human nature? I would say if you're on the left, you tend to think that humans are good people. You tend to think that human nature is a positive thing, and that people are all right, and we should trust in other people to do the right thing. And I think that is very much me. I'm an optimist when it comes to other human beings. I give a lot of people trust and say that, I give them the hope that they'll do the right thing. If you're on the right side of the political spectrum, you tend to think that there's an evil naturally in the world. People are bad or always skewed towards greed and making the wrong things happen. And you tend to have sort of a negative view on human nature. And that's at a bare bones sort of breakdown of your ideology and ontology. So for me, I guess my own story is I think people are generally good, and that's why governments are good, because we give other human beings the authority to regulate how we conduct ourselves in society. And I think that government will naturally do the right thing as long as we, the people, are involved in the government. Conservatives tend to say, no, the government is bad, the government is corrupt, the government impinges my own ability to do what I want to do. So I don't agree with that story.
I don't actually think very often about being on like one side or another of the political spectrum. I more just tend to, I don't know, think about what I desire as being a member of a nation. And I wouldn't necessarily say that government is good or bad, but I want it to be something that is created by the people, and by the people as a whole. Not by a certain group of people, and not funded or led by corporate interests, for example, but led by the people who make up that nation, so that it can make decisions responsibly for the citizens and for the people, not just citizens, who live in that nation.
Matt, what do you think?
I was giving this some thought, and I'm glad that you brought up what you said, Jason, because I'm not sure I entirely agree with you. I think the reason why liberalism appeals to me is that it's about sort of identifying where power exists in the current system. And what I mean by that is that under the sort of conservatism that exists today, modern conservatism, Reaganomics, or whatever you want to call it, power, wealth particularly, and through it power has accumulated into the hands of a select few people. And I don't necessarily agree that people are inherently good. I think that people are inherently self-interested, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't believe that Mitch McConnell is evil, for example. I believe that he's self-interested. And I think that it's necessary to sort of guard against that, because when people are allowed to sort of place their own self-interest over others to an extensive degree, as we're starting to see with extreme wealth disparities in this country, as we have seen for the past 40 years, a majority of people suffer, and I think that's wrong.
I mean, the right has been so good, though, Republicans, at saying the American people. They're talking about all people, and so to say that they're self-interested is very odd, because the language that they use so often is the American people.
Well, they obviously they need to appeal to a number of people in order to maintain their control. But I think that, I mean, obviously we see with this H.R. 1 Act that if they were really for the people, they would be supporting it.
So do you think Mitch McConnell, when he's behind a podium, do you think that what he is saying, he knows it's bad for the most people and he's saying it anyways? Or do you think he actually believes that what he's saying is going to help out the American people?
I think he prioritizes certain people over others. I think he decides that the people he cares about are the people that he wants to serve, are the people with the money, the people who are already well off. And I think he is among them.
I think it might be a mixture of the two, to be honest, where people have different ideas about what caring looks like and about what taking responsibility looks like. And I think that one of the biggest arguments of conservatives is looking at wealth disparity, especially if you're someone who has never experienced poverty and you're saying, this is your fault that you're there and you can get yourself out of this, and genuinely believing that.
Yeah.
So I think, that's not an excuse. I don't want to say that it's an excuse, but I think that is, to go back to this idea of a narrative, I think that is a story that someone like McConnell might be telling himself. I don't think that he came from poverty. I don't know where he grew up. So I can't say that for sure, but, if you've never experienced or been faced with poverty and the cycle of poverty where when your family, when you grow up in a poor family and you aren't able to access the same things, that you're not able to get out of that as well as wealthier people might think that you're able to.
I think that's well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On that, listeners, we are going to wrap up episode 49 of Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. We talked today about H.R. 1, that's the For the People Act of 2019 that was proposed by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. It seeks to expand voting rights. It seeks to make campaign finance both less influenced by corporate funding and more able to be influenced by everyday folks. And it also aims to expand ethics requirements for those holding office and make it so that they can conduct less shady things. That is the H.R. 1 bill. It was passed by the House of Representatives. It is not going anywhere in the U.S. Senate because Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell won't allow it to be voted upon on the Senate floor, and he calls it the Democratic Politician Protection Act. He views it as just supporting Democrats and not actually being beneficial for us as a society. If you want to support a piece of legislation, go look up H.R. 1. None of our surrounding House of Reps members in the counties surrounding Monroe County voted for that, so it hits close to home, and that they do not support H.R. 1. There's a lot in there that I think we should be favorable of, and if you don't agree with everything, that's fine. It's a 500-page bill. There's a lot in there. See what you agree with, see what you don't. Tell your representative to change it. We also talked about political ideology. What stories do we tell ourselves, and where, and how much do facts matter when it comes to politics, or how much do emotions matter? And to what extent